We're going to gavel this meeting to order and welcome you to the March 26th regularly scheduled meeting of the California Transportation Commission. And I'm so glad. I was just going to ask for the doors to be closed so the air conditioning works, so yay for that. Welcome all, and roll call, please.
Commissioner Alvarado. Yes. Commissioner Assemi. Here. Commissioner Burke. Here. Commissioner Arp. Here. Commissioner Fromer. Here. Commissioner Gilmetti. Commissioner Gardino. Present. Commissioner Inman. Here. Commissioner Madaffer. Commissioner Tavoloni. Chair Dunn.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is approval of our minutes for January 22, 2015.
So moved. Second.
A motion by Commissioner Gilmetti, second by Jim Arp. And all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Thank you very much. Next is our executive director's report. Mr. Kempton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some housekeeping items. First of all, please, as the Chair has indicated, keep the doors closed. Two reasons. There's a luncheon scheduled out there which may be a bit noisy. And secondly, and more importantly, the temperature in this room, and we're trying to get it cooled down. So please keep those doors closed. If you need to use restrooms, the pool house is the closest restroom. And the other item that I need to advise the Commission of and all of our folks in the audience, Madam Chair, is that there will be no town hall meeting in April, as is listed on the current Commission schedule.
Fantastic. Any questions of our executive director? Okay, thank you very much. Commission reports? Yes, Ms. Inman.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to share that as part of my regular responsibilities, I participated with the Access DC trip to Washington, D.C. Earlier this month, where 200 leaders from Southern California. And the good news for all of us that are here today is I think the transportation teams were the largest in terms of number and the loudest in terms of vocalizing our needs. So we've come a long way and not just talking to ourselves. My perception is that there is consensus that transportation should be a bipartisan issue. However, walking that walk seems to be a little bit of a challenge, and we'll see. You know, the Highway Trust Fund or the MAP 21 is set to expire in, 60 days, a few more. And there isn't a lot of confidence that we'll get a transportation bill. However, Chairman Schuster of House T&I is hopeful that we'll see something, so I would just encourage all of you to stay engaged. Clearly, investing in our infrastructure is important to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Assemi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have also recently visited our nation's capital and had an opportunity to visit with several of our House leaders, both from across the aisle, on transportation issues and on let me split this into two areas. On the policy issues, there seems to be bipartisan effort in giving states with local matching funds a higher priority for federal funding. Also, streamlining of NEPA on states that have an environmental regulatory process that's as restrictive or as comprehensive as NEPA or higher. And there's some movement on indexing the gas tax to inflation. Potentially, that may come from the Senate side and get back to the House side, but it looks like there's potential movement in that arena. And then on the funding side, there are several new funding sources that the House House Republicans are looking at. One is repatriation of foreign assets or foreign profits back into the United States with a taxing mechanism of between 5 and 10% potentially, and allocating some or all of those funds for transportation, for our national transportation needs. Also, new royalties on federal land leases to oil companies, and a taxing at the well. So if you add all those numbers up, the new royalties, the repatriation of foreign profits and assets, and I can say this: there's lots of interest, as Commissioner Inman just stated, for a bipartisan effort to getting a 6-year bill out, hopefully by this fall, somewhere between $300 and $400 billion. So that's very exciting news. We're going to report that back to the Commission.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Commissioner Arp, and then Commissioner Guardino. Oh, you're done. Excellent. Mr. Guardino.
Thank you, Chair Dunn, and I love the sound of that, Chair Dunn. In a vain attempt to try to undo the damage in Washington, D.C. done by Commissioner Assemi and Commissioner Inman, I too recently returned from our nation's capital with 55 of our executives from my day job from Silicon Valley. In 44 hours, we held one-on-one meetings with 19 of the 100 members of the United States Senate and 85 of the 435 members of the House on transportation and other issues. And while there was receptivity on both sides for the overall need, as Commissioners Inman and Assemi have noticed, the devil is always in the details. We pushed for a 6-year reauthorization to actually happen this year with a stable funding stream with it. So that's our starting point. We heard really good things from the chair of the House Transportation Committee, Bill Schuster, who truly does work that committee the old-fashioned way in a bipartisan way. We find hope around that. And House Majority Leader McCarthy also echoed those sentiments. So we'll see what they do, and we'll all continue to push, both wearing our commission hats as well as our day jobs.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Burke.
Could you turn on your mic, Commissioner? We want to hear you.
Okay, all right. I'm going to just touch on about 3 things really, really fast. Obviously, one of the things of concern in terms of allocation of funding is some of the discussions that the Northeast Corridor should keep their money rather than giving it to long distance and other states. So we have to continue, I think, to monitor that to make sure that while we support the Northeast Corridor, and it's great that it makes a lot of money, we do need to have a system that includes all of the states in long distance to service all of the people of the United States. 3 areas of concern that are very important. 2 relate to safety. And we all are very aware of some of the accidents that have occurred. And so there has to be greater education of people of how to drive on areas of where there is a compatibility with rail, whether or not it's some of our long Amtrak or whether it's our commuter rail. There has to be education and also moving forward with safety mechanisms that Metrolink has to be commended for the fact that they had committed the resources for better safety and also for PTC. So that's one of the areas. One of the others, it's not talked about a lot, but there's a lot of attention in Washington, is in terms of the transport through states of petroleum and ethanol that's coming from North Dakota and some other places. And the regulations are going to be coming forward very soon to address this whole problem. There have been some accidents, and some of them have been very, very bad and unfortunate. So hopefully there will be regulations and that there will not be a real outcry and opposition to some of the regulations that will seek to have safety in terms of transport of some of those materials. Finally, there is a continuing attempt to have on-time performance throughout the nation in terms of state as well as across the country, and also Northeast Corridor. So that means working with the freights brand and trying to coordinate it so that it's available and possible to have on-time performance. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you for your double duty on Amtrak as well as CTC. Very, very appreciative of the time that you spend. Commissioner Fromer.
Well, I did not go to Washington, D.C.
Thank God.
Try to stay away from that place. I was contacted a few weeks ago by a number of elected officials and community leaders concerning the draft EIR that's coming out of the 710 North extension that was being released by MTA with Caltrans. They had asked for some additional time for public comment, and I'm very pleased. I just wanted to thank our Caltrans director, Malcolm, for listening to them and for agreeing to extend the time for comment, and also District 7 for jumping in there. I think that was a positive thing to do, and certainly it was appreciated by the elected officials, the local mayors and council people that I spoke to. I just want to say thank you for listening to that message.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. And seeing no more red lights here, from the chair, a couple of items. First, I want to recognize in the audience today, we have the privilege of joining us Congressman Bill Thomas of Bakersfield, former chair of House Ways and Means. Bill, thank you very much. I think you're going to comment later, I suppose.
Today, I'd like to stress, based upon what's going on in Washington,
Well, it was wishful thinking on my part, sir, because of all the good work that you did under your service. So thank you. Thank you very much. Next up, one of the committees that California Transportation Commission is chartered to have is an aeronautics committee, and as a result of my honor to serve as chair, I must come off, and we must have a new appointment to replace me, joining Fran Inman on this august body. And so the rule of thumb is he who is not here gets appointed. And Mr. Tavallone is not present, although respectfully, I did ask him and he consented, and I would offer Joe Tavallone to serve on the Aeronautics Committee with a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Guardino. Second by Commissioner Burke. Any opposition? Thank you very much. Okay, we're committee full now. Last but not least, it is our tradition to honor the outgoing chair of the California Transportation Commission, Carl Guardino, with a little token of appreciation for his year of service. And so with that, we actually even have this cool clock that has a real picture of your real family, not a fake picture of a fake family. So would you join me in thanking Carl Guardino for your service? It has a pen, too. So, anyway.
Wow. They didn't include them. They keep me away from sharp objects.
It has a pen.
What an honor it is to serve with such leaders, both on this side of the dais as well as that side, to advance our state. Thank you all.
Thank you again, Carl. Really appreciate your service. Okay, next up, item number 5, commissioners' meetings for compensation. Got a motion from Mr. Alvarado. Second from Mr. Fromer. All in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Matter carries. Next up, Secretary Brian Kelly, would you give us your report of the agency?
Yes, Madam Chair, happy to. First, I want to congratulate you and the new Vice Chair on your new position and first hearing in that regard. So
I was so happy you didn't say condolences.
No. A hearty congratulations. A couple of things just want to update on. Obviously, I think many folks know there's a vibrant conversation in Sacramento in and around the legislature on trying to get a new funding package for transportation in the budget context this year. The governor laid it out in the State of the State speech, and legislative leaders from both houses are, in some instances, circulating proposals, and the work is continuing as we work through the budget this year. So I just wanted to sort of flag that we're continuing to work on that important issue for all of us on getting a long-term sustainable transportation funding source this year. Secondly, and related to that, of course, The administration has also pitched in the trailer bill this year, and there's a policy bill from the chairman, Jim Frazier from Contra Costa County, on the assembly side to move forward on streamlining the approval process for pricing projects. That's also moving forward. And then I think very relevant for those funding conversations, you will hear today an update from the department on both the shop and maintenance plan. And I think those reveal the great need that we have and the reason that we should be pursuing transportation funding plan this year. I'm also complimentary of the Commission and the staff for the revised guidelines that are pending on the active transportation program, a program that we put in place to partner with regions on bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And it sounds to me, based on what I've heard from both interests and others, that there's a broad sort of sense that the program is getting improved, and the second round will be better than the first. And I think that's, I want to compliment the Commission on that. Finally, just a reminder note as well that we have a process at the agency to allocate cap-and-trade funds this year for transit capital grants. We have a call for projects out now, and those are due on April 10th this year, and our intent is to award the first round in June. So I just wanted to flag those issues, and again, congratulations to you and the new Vice Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Secretary Kelly. Any questions for the Secretary? Very good. Thank you again. Next up is our Caltrans Director, Malcolm Doherty, and Caltrans report. Welcome, Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. And I will offer up my early apologies. I will not be able to stay here for the duration of the meeting. I have to fly back to Sacramento, and I'm entertaining the CEOs of the 18 Western DOT directors beginning this evening and into tomorrow to talk about transportation issues across the western United States. A couple of personnel issues. To backfill our District 9 District Director position, Mr. Brent Green, who you may be familiar with, took that position, has been appointed there. And Andy Nierenberg, our right-of-way division chief from District 7, will be filling in until we fill that position permanently. I'd like to quickly thank Mike Beauchamp, who is acting in District 9, and he has gone back to an appointed position in construction in District 8. I also wanted to introduce Michael Johnson. You'll hear from Michael Johnson later. I think he may be talking about asset management, but Michael Johnson is in the room, and he was appointed to the Caltrans Asset Management position, and that's going to be a subject that is going to be very important to us going forward. Yesterday, we honored Bassem Wellham, the District 8 District Director, upon his retirement. His last day with Caltrans is on Tuesday. And I thanked him for his service to Caltrans and the state of California and the people of California yesterday, but I also wanted to mention that here in this forum. John Belinsky, who is our District 2 District Director, will be filling in for Bassem while we fill that position. We've done a continued investment and efforts into enhancing communication internally. I just wanted to share very quickly with you, we conducted a town hall meeting for our staff, which included an auditorium full of people, telephone connections, and then web connections. And we believe that we had approximately 5,000 to 6,000 employees engaged in that town hall meeting. The meat of that was a question and answer session after I had given them an overview of the new mission, vision, and goals and the strategic plan. And that was just another way we want to make sure that we're disseminating information directly from the director's office to our staff at a large organization in a large state. For external communication, in your packet, you have a copy of the latest edition of the mile marker. Again, this is our effort to be transparent and also accountable to high-level performance metrics in a very readable fashion and relevant fashion to our audience, which is not only the public but elected officials and the California Transportation Commission. So if you have an opportunity to view that, I would encourage you to do so. The California Transportation Plan 2040 is also out on the street for comment in draft form. The comment period goes through April 17th. We have held 7 public workshops. Actually, the last of those public workshops is this evening in Oakland. We also had 2 webinars associated with that as well to maximize the opportunity for comment in the 45-day period. This is the long-range plan with emphasis on sustainable community strategies in order to meet our greenhouse gas emission mandates by California statute. And so that is also on our website, the California Transportation Plan 2040.org, and I'd invite you to look at that. Early next week, we will distribute our updated Caltrans strategic plan, which will cover the period of time from 2015 to 2020. It clearly articulates our mission, vision, and goals, our updated mission, vision, and goals, the objectives that will define our success in achieving those goals, as well as performance measures, as well as targets for each of those performance measures. And that document, we will make sure we circulate when it is distributed in final form to each of you through Commission staff. On today's agenda, you'll get an update on the draft assumptions for the 2016 fund estimate from Stephen Keck. As mentioned by Secretary Kelly, you'll hear about the 2015 10-year SHOP program as well as the 2015 5-year maintenance program. The asset management plan actually will be presented by Komi Ajizi, and also an update on the interregional transportation strategic plan. And I also want to express my appreciation to Commission staff and commissioners on the cooperation with the Department on updating our project delivery report, and you'll get a presentation on that as well today, too. So a lot of things going on, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Commissioner Inman.
Thank you, Malcolm. I think my question is more for Comey, and I think he's out there. Could we ask, I think earlier today, you participated at ITS on the technology conference. So maybe next meeting you could kind of give us a briefing, since we all know that technology is going to be a big part of our solutions in the future. If you can maybe share with us what you heard and learned and what we should all know.
Of course.
Very good. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you, Director Doherty. Appreciate your report. I don't think Vince Mamano is here, correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair. He has requested that he be allowed to speak later on the agenda, so we'll monitor his presence and insert his comments at an appropriate time.
CHP forewarned and everything. Great. Okay,
Correct.
good. Well, excellent. And that's wonderful, because I'm really looking forward to the welcome to the region by the chairman of the board of the Orange County Transportation Authority and Mayor Pro Tem of the beautiful city of Irvine in which we are located, Mr. Jeff Lalaway, and also I think Ken Phipps, Deputy CEO of OCTA, is joining him. Welcome. It's nice, Chair Lalaway.
I guess I have to work this now. Goodness gracious. Oh, boy. We'll figure it out. Well, welcome to Orange County. I'm Jeff Lalaway, Chairman of the Board of the Orange County Transportation Authority, and also the Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Irvine, in which we're in today. OCTA is honored to be hosting the CTC in our beautiful city. I'd like to share with you some brief facts about Orange County.
Mr. Lalaway, if I could please excuse the interruption. I just wanted to remind the commissioners that they have a copy of your slides in front of them if they prefer to follow along. And the screen's at somewhat of a difficult angle, so I just wanted to make sure they knew they had your presentation in front of them.
And I finally figured out how to use this, so now I'm dangerous. Orange County, as you may know, is the 6th largest county in the country, comprised of 34 cities with a population of over 3.3 million people. Orange County is approximately 800 square miles, of which Irvine is about 67 square miles in Orange County, and boasts over 40 miles of coastline. Orange County is one of Forbes magazine's 2014 best places for business, and currently has an unemployment rate of just at 5%, which is one of the lowest rates in the entire state. Orange County is expected to grow by more than 400,000 residents by 2035, which is the equivalent of adding a city the size of Miami to Orange County. Hey, it worked. In light of Southern California's growing population, the importance of regional connectivity has never been more important. OCTA works collaboratively with each of our local transportation partners, including Caltrans, Metrolink, LoSan, and the Transportation Corridor Agency, the TCA. OCTA also works very closely with our neighboring transportation commissions, San Diego to the south, Riverside and San Bernardino to the east, and Los Angeles to the north. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Ken Phipps, who is our OCTA's Deputy Chief Executive. But before I do, I'd like to mention how OCTA appreciates our partnership with the Commission. and particularly with our support of our newly elected chair, Lucy Dunn. We're so happy to have you as chair. Yes. We would also like to welcome back to Orange County our good friend Will Kempton and congratulate him on his new role as the executive director. Great to have you back, Will. I'd also like to recognize our partnership with the California State Transportation Agency and Caltrans and the progress our agencies have made in improving mobility throughout the state and throughout the region, and particularly Orange County. Ken's now going to walk you through the Measure M2 sales tax program, Orange County's Prop 1B investments, our innovative environmental mitigation program, and several other programs and upcoming projects that may be of interest to you. Thank you very much.
Pretty good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to do this today. I'll try to move it along pretty quickly and focus on what truly is innovative. And really getting to the heart of the matter, Measure M back in 1991 was in and of itself pretty innovative. It's the half-cent sales tax countywide. It promised a discrete set of programs and projects to the voters of Orange County, and it delivered. In fact, it over-delivered in the sense that there was an extra freeway project included at the end of the measure. The SR-22 was dramatically improved and innovative in and of itself in that it was the first design-build improvement on an active freeway. Measure M was so successful, Measure M1, that in 2006, voters, by a 70% margin, voted to extend it for 30 years with the Measure M2 program. Very similar, had the same modal percentages, its project splits, but it went a little bit above and beyond in some areas. There were 2 environmental programs that were included in the measure, and I'll talk about those a little bit later, but they were very important to the environmental community, and they gained the support of the environmental community when it came to the overall measure. Okay. All right. Prop 1B. You're certainly very familiar with the importance of Prop 1B funding within Orange County. It's been a very significant source of revenue, and it's enabled the delivery of 110 projects. More than $860 million in Prop 1B funding has leveraged an additional $950 million of other funding for a total investment of $1.8 billion. There have been 9 major freeway projects that have been improved, 7 grade separations, and many local streets and roads and transit and rail safety projects. Now, the 2 environmental programs that I mentioned earlier that are within Measure M2, one is a freeway mitigation program, and that's funded with 5% of the freeway revenues. So roughly a little bit more than 2% of the overall Measure M revenues. And that's to acquire open space. To date, over 1,000 acres, 1,150 acres have been acquired, and they'll be preserved permanently as open space. And then in addition to that, 400 acres have been mitigated and restored to their original natural habitats. So that's one of the 2 programs. The other is a water quality program, and that's funded with 2% of the Measure M funds off the top. Each program, roughly $320 million, and the water quality program has implemented 125 projects to date, more than $39 million. That installs catch basins and filters and prevents pollution from getting into the storm drains and eventually out to the ocean. Strong support from the environmental community. The Measure M freeway project program under M2, 43% of the funding goes here, and that will be in excess of $6 billion. Very active throughout the entire freeway process. You can see conceptual all the way to projects already complete under M2. So $5.7 billion in freeway projects that are currently at some state of completion or improvement. And then there's the 91 express lanes. Certainly originally built by the private sector, very, very innovative in that it was the first all-electronic toll road, often described as a land bridge linking Riverside County with Orange County. It's a single point of entry and exit for the 10-mile corridor. It's recently I did a presentation TRB on the 91. They described it as the granddaddy of express lanes. It's tried and true, weathered the storm of the recession. It has an algorithm that automatically adjusts the prices based on traffic volumes. So there are prices that are established for every hour of the day in each direction. It's not dynamically priced, but it is variable priced, and there's certainty there so that people, as they're approaching the corridor, they know what the toll is going to be and what they're going to be paying. Very successful, and has generated significant excess revenues that have allowed improvement in the corridor. That was the benefit of public ownership, is that a non-compete clause that protected the private sector investor was eliminated, and to date, OCTA has added 18 general purpose lane miles immediately adjacent to the express lanes. So that improves the travel time for everybody in the corridor. Within the Measure M2 program, as I mentioned earlier on the freeway program, there is the 405 project, one of the most congested, heavily traveled freeways anywhere in the country. And it was largely untouched under Measure M1. And Measure M2 promised to deliver a single general purpose lane improvement for the length of the corridor. I think there are some. Okay, so that's shown here, the yellow lane. And obviously, in order to do that, under the current situation, 17 bridges along the corridor need to be demolished and rebuilt. Those bridges will be widened to Master Plan of Arterial Highway standards, and there will be significant improvement and benefit to the cities along the corridor in doing so. But in doing so, it provides an opportunity to do more than just the Measure M project. So the environmental process included other options. One of those options was to take a look at what could possibly be done similar to the 91 express lanes. It included an express lane option that, when combined with the existing HOV, provided a tolling opportunity for people to get through the corridor more quickly when they needed to, just like the 91. 91 express lanes, on average, 8 trips per month. People use it when they need to make it to the airport or get to the important business meeting, make it to the kids' soccer game, whatever it may be. It's a choice opportunity to provide quicker travel time through the corridor. That was the option that emerged through the environmental planning process, and it is the preferred alternative. OCTA is working closely with Caltrans to implement the project. Within the area of active transportation, also very important, it meets a critical need and benefits everyone. There's already an extensive bike and pedestrian system within Orange County, but we're looking at ways to enhance it, make it better. One of the most ambitious projects in that is a project called the OC Loop, and you can see it in the northern part of the county. It will connect the Santa Ana River Trail, bike paths along the coast, Coyote Creek, and then along rail right-of-way in the northern part of the county. A 66-mile loop runs through 17 different cities, connects 180 schools and 200 parks. It's quite significant and would provide a tremendous benefit. About 70% of those paths are complete today, and there's a gap closure project that, when complete, great benefit. 180. 180 schools would gain access from the overall loop.
I'm sorry, what was the level of investment for those 180 schools?
What are the schools investing?
No, what is the measure investing to accomplish that?
Yeah. The total amount of money to be programmed over time, what the board did is they took action to designate 10% of the ongoing CMAQ funding, roughly $4 million a year, to active transportation programs. To date, there's been $14 million programmed to 29 different projects.
And what was the cost of the 66 miles?
Well, most of that has been built over many, many years, and 70% of it already exists. We're working the design effort, the planning, the design, and the construction is still under development for the remaining 30%. Okay, so back here. In addition to that, OCTA is a member of the Metrolink Joint Powers Authority and operates Metrolink service within the county, 3 different lines in Orange County. And certainly there, safety has been a huge priority. There, a Orange County grade crossing safety improvement project looked at 52 grade crossings, helped to implement quiet zones in cities along the corridor, an audible warning system implemented in San Clemente, and then certainly positive train control, which will be beneficial to the overall system. In addition to that, OCTA has a new role as the LOSAN managing agency. Not everyone knows OCTA owns 42 miles of the LOSAN corridor that runs through Orange County, very important in that. And the major effort there is to better coordinate the 3 different services that run on the LOSAN corridor. And that will serve as a benefit to the passengers. It's really not important to the passenger what train they're riding. It's only important that they're able to get to and from where they need to go when they need to go. And then the last project I'll talk about is the Santa Ana Garden Grove streetcar project. This is funded through Project S in Measure M. It's a little bit more than 4 miles to connect the busiest rail corridor in the west here, the Losan corridor, with OCTA's busiest bus route out on Harbor Boulevard. And so it will run through downtown Santa Ana, the historic area, downtown government centers, and then connect with a dedicated right-of-way. It's the old Pacific Electric right-of-way, and run from there on a diagonal fashion up to Garden Grove, and a new transit center will be built there. $250 million project. It's moving along very well. At this point in time, we expect to be in construction by fall of 2017 and operational by fall of 2019. And we're eagerly awaiting response from the feds through the federal New Starts program. We expect that it will be half funded by Measure M and then funded through the New Starts program. So that concludes the information I had to share with you today, and I thank you for the opportunity. And once again, welcome to Orange County, and enjoy your visit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. Commissioners, any questions? Wonderful. Really appreciate your leadership, Chairman Lalloway. I also want to acknowledge your colleagues on the board as well here today. Gary Miller also serves on the OCTA board. Welcome, Gary. And, of course, Ryan Chamberlain, District 12 Director, is a member of the OCTA board. I have to thank you very, very much, because I'm so proud of the innovation that comes out of Orange County that we hope will viral to other communities as we learn from them as well. But it is just remarkable, the hard work that you do and the leadership for all of this effort. So thank you very much again, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time today. Okay, so with that, moving on to a report by our regional agencies moderator, is Renee Deverioki.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners, Secretary, and Directors. Our group met yesterday. An exciting action item for us today is the adoption of the Cycle 2 guidelines for the Active Transportation Program. The approval not only sets in motion the state call for projects, but also kicks off the MPO development for individual calls as well. This will be a busy application development season for many of our member agencies. It's been a quick turnaround from Cycle 1, and CTC staff has been quite open and willing to receive any input and has engaged in a variety of stakeholders. You heard from a lot of us at the last meeting. It's been a very open and transparent process, and thank you very much for that. What makes ATP unique is that it's comprised of a variety of funding sources and is a melding of a variety of prior programs. We as RTPAs are encouraged and hope to continue to have the flexibility to apply and fund projects, plans, and programs to both help and encourage the use of alternative modes. Flexibility within these early rounds can help shape and promote strong projects in the future, because good planning leads to good projects. Another item of interest for us is the draft STIP guidelines. This too has been an exercise of balancing stakeholder input and will continue to develop over the summer. And we'd also like to thank staff for their willingness to work with us on an approach to assessing performance, which is new in this guidelines. The updated language helps to reflect the much of the work that's done at the regional transportation planning level, done by many of our modelers within our staff. Additionally, we'd like to thank the staff for inclusion of language related to our RTIP template. This is a self-developed template that we've put together to help with transparency of what we are as regions submitting for the STIP and our projects, but also to help engage the public a little bit more so that they can see what we're doing. Finally, I would like to end with an area that we have of concern, which is the anticipated drop in the capacity of the STIP in the next fiscal year, and additionally the drop in STIP revenues in general. With more projects programmed than capacity, the challenge for priority what moves forward and must wait will be a challenge for both large and small agencies. This is similar to what we faced back in 2009, and there's been many policy changes that have happened since then, so we are looking forward to working with CTC staff and all of you as we move forward and figure out what this next year has in stake for us. And we're encouraged by all of your efforts going to the federal level and asking for a long-term solution. So thank you very much for that. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Very good. Thank you very much. We appreciate your report. Next up, Rural Counties Task Force Chair. This is not Jerry Barton.
No, it's not Commissioners. It's Mara Toomey, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Rural
Welcome,
Counties
Mara.
Task Force. First, I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Dunn on her election as Chair,
Thank you.
and to thank Commissioner Gardino for all his service as Chair during the past year. The Rural Counties Task Force met on March 20th and discussed the following issues and concerns. In regard to the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, the rural counties want to emphasize that the current priority interregional corridors serve as the backbone of goods movement and travel within the state, and are concerned that some significant rural corridors may not be included in the proposed update. These corridors provide tremendous transportation and economic value by providing access to some of the most popular destinations in California, and more significantly, are a critical lifeline for rural communities. In regard to the recently released draft STIP guidelines, the rural counties are concerned with the removal of the objective to provide the linking of rural and small urban centers to the trunk system, as we believe the elimination of this objective may limit the ability of rural areas to obtain ITIP funds for important projects that connect our communities. And finally, in regard to the Active Transportation Program, the rural counties want to express their appreciation for the efforts of the Commission and their staff, and Caltrans and their staff, to consider our concerns in the revision of the guidelines. This concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mara. Yes, Fran.
Thank you, Maura. I think also in visiting with you all, especially in some of our rural connectivity points where we're serving the agricultural market, and I know Commissioner Assemi likes to remind me that Central California feeds 25% of the nation, or the world, I think it is. 80% of the nation, 25% of the world. The seasonality has come up too, and I think that's important for all of us because many of those products actually have expiration dates, and so we have to be sensitive to the fact not only do we have high volumes, but also the seasonality increases the challenges.
Right, correct. Many of our corridors are important goods movement corridors. However, they don't have the overall, if you look at annual truck volumes, they tend not to compete as well against some other routes throughout the state. However, during the prime months of agricultural production, they are some of the heaviest traveled truck routes. Any questions?
Mr. Gomedi.
Mara, have you identified which state routes those are?
It appears the major concern for the rural counties are the elimination potentially from the ITSP of Highway 49, which serves the mountain areas and several resorts in the mountain areas, and is also a critical lifeline for those communities, and the potential of the elimination of 4641, which is a very heavily traveled freight corridor. A great many trucks bring goods out of the Central Coast region to I-5 and other destinations.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Maura. Appreciate your report. Next up, we have our Self-Help Counties Coalition Chair, Diane Steinhauser.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Dunn and members of the Commission. A pleasure speaking to you briefly today. I'm going to talk first very briefly about legislation. The Self-Help Counties is working towards a support position for the Kevin Mullins bill, AB 464. This will raise the allowable cap of local sales tax above the state rate from 2% to 3%. Many of our local boards are working right now towards local option sales taxes, and to not have to pursue special legislation jurisdiction by jurisdiction is a great benefit for us. So we're looking forward to that bill going forward. Thank you for a very early indication of support from the administration on that effort. I also want to briefly mention AB 194. This is a Self-Help County sponsored bill with Assembly Transportation Chair Jim Frazier. We're working to expand tolling authority. We're also working there with State Transportation Agency Secretary Brian Kelly on an option of bringing this forward through administration language. I want to give special recognition to the department. Joe Rouse has been working for the past couple of years under Komea Gise, under Malcolm Doherty, on a deputy directive regarding managed lanes. They brought a lot of people into the tent to try and get it right, and we want to say thank you for the effort that was made on that. We're also very interested as a group on how we may be able to support Assembly Speaker Atkins and Senator Bell's very preliminary proposals on a portfolio of revenue increases. We're already out educating on the need for transportation funds statewide, and if I may just give you a very brief summary of some of what is happening in counties around the state. I'll start with Contra Costa. Last Thursday night, March 19th, they approved proceeding with the development of a sales tax expenditure plan and a public education campaign following on their recent countywide plan approvals. They're going to be carrying that out and looking towards November of 2016 for an additional sales tax in Contra Costa. On the aspiring county side, Solano is considering options presently. They're doing a round of polling. Sometime in the next few months, they're going to be making a decision. They'll have a strong emphasis on local roads with what they're doing there. Sonoma County is going to be on the ballot in June with a general sales tax increase of 1/4 cent over 5 years. They're in a heavy public education campaign right now up in Sonoma. Monterey doesn't have an official transportation expenditure plan, but they have a very strong set of projects and programs. The TAMC board recently approved in February public funding for education and outreach. They're very hopeful and are also going to be relying on the raising of the cap in order to bring anything forward in 2016. In Stanislaus, another aspiring county, they've hired a public outreach education consultant. Their board has okayed testing public support for a possible transportation expenditure plan. No decision yet, but the outreach is going to inform whether they go forward or not in Stanislaus. In San Francisco, most recently here in November, a small bond was approved for transit operations, stations, streetlight program. The mayor is looking towards a possible vehicle license fee increase in 2016 and a possible sales tax measure in 2018 that will address transportation needs in San Francisco. In Marin, in my county, my board approved funds to update our previous needs assessment, which is quite old. We did some polling last summer, which indicated strong support for a 1/4 cent sales tax geared towards local roads, seniors, school bus service, and pedestrian facilities. No decision yet, but we're going to be working on planning activity over the next many months. San Mateo, they are unsure of whether they're going to be proceeding or not. They are dependent on the AB 464, the Mullins bill, raising the cap. Once they understand the progress on that, they'll consider whether they're going to be going forward or not. Another aspiring county, Santa Cruz, is in the early stages of considering either a 2/3 or a general sales tax. They're going to soon be doing a first round of polling. In Santa Clara, last spring, summer, they worked very hard towards the development of a transportation expenditure plan. Their public education is fully funded, and they're going forward with that presently. And they have quite a kind of a collection of features in what they're going to be bringing forward, from transit to roads to seniors and disabled and local streets especially. Up in Placer, they have an education consultant on board. They're in the middle of their transportation expenditure plan planning process. They have focus group activity and polling coming along in the next few months. Down south, LAMTA is currently getting information from their sub-regional bodies for priorities. They're going to consider a framework this summer in July on what might go into a transportation expenditure plan. They're looking for an augment and extend approach, much like what was recently approved in Alameda County. And San Diego's in the research phase of a half-cent sales tax, a quality of life measure, and they'll have a go, no-go decision on that by the end of summer. So we have 13 local jurisdictions that, and that's probably not all of them. We have transit operators in local cities as well that are looking at measures to try and address the transportation need. I think the key point there is all of us are doing the education and the outreach to bring needs to the public's attention. And so growing that through the efforts that we're seeing coming from Speaker Atkins and Senator Bell is very important, and your efforts as well. I last but not least wanted to thank and recognize a joint meeting last week by the Self-Help County Coalition had with Caltrans leadership and all the district directors around the state. We look forward to that kind of a cooperation, coordination continuing. And finally, I wanted to personally thank Executive Director Kempton, who came down to the Bay Area and was not his usual Dr. Doom self, and displayed much hope and on upcoming revenue measures that he and you, I'm sure, will be considering. So thank you, Will. That concludes my report. I'd like to come back every 3-4 months and give you an update on what the various counties are doing. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners? It might also be good, Diane, I was just thinking as you were going through the whole detail of that report, if you would provide sort of a matrix in summary. I think that would be very helpful for all of us to review and kind of keep track of. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem. The other matrix that we're working on is what do current sales tax fund, kind of broken down categorically. So we hope to bring that forward
I think that would
in
be
the next
helpful.
month or two.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Madam Chair, we have a hearing set for 1:00 p.m. on the Commission's Conflict of Interest Code. I might suggest that we take items 15 and 16 next and come back to the regular agenda after the hearing.
Very good. With no objection, we're at, it is, my watch says 12:55, so are you sure you want to start early? Oh, you've got 12:59. Okay. Very good. Then we will start with item 15, hearing on the proposed amendment to the Commission's Conflict of Interest Code. Susan Branson.
Commissioners, agenda items, staff will take agenda items 15 and 16 together. This is proposed amendments to the Commission's Conflict of Interest Code to add certain staff positions into the Conflict of Interest Code, to add a disclosure category for the members of the Technical Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, also to subject those members to the Commission's Conflict of Interest Code, and to make other technical amendments. The proposed amendments have been shared with the Fair Political Practices Commission. Agenda item 15 is a hearing to hear from any members of the public or anyone who might want to speak to this. So my question is, have we received any public comment?
Any comments, Mr. Kempton? Nope. No request for comment?
Okay. With no comments, staff would recommend that the Commission approve the proposed conflict of interest amendments and direct staff to move forward on processing these amendments through the Fair Political Practices Commission.
A motion by Commissioner Alvarado, a second by Mr. Fromer. Mr. Fromer, any discussion? Any support? All in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? None. Motion passes. Okay, so we've now taken care of it both, right? We're all done with 15 and 16. Thank you very much. And we're ahead of schedule. Okay. Back then. Now to item number 13, state and federal legislative matters. And we're up for Carrie Porvahidi. Carrie.
Commissioners, agenda item number 13 is a pink and is an action item. February 27th was the deadline for the state legislature to introduce bills in the first year of the two-year session. May 1st is the last day for policy committees to hear and report bills with fiscal impact to fiscal committees in their house of origin. May 15th is the last day for policy committees to hear and report to the floor non-fiscal bills introduced in their house of origin. And May 22nd is the last day for policy committees to meet prior to the June 9th to hear and consider bills in their house of origin. 61 bills identified in Attachment A met the criteria approved by the Commission. Out of the 61 bills we are monitoring, staff is recommending the Commission take a support or support in concept position on the following 6 bills. AB 4 Linder bill would prohibit late fee revenue from being transferred from the state highway account to any fund or account for the purpose of payment of debt service on transportation general obligation bonds. AB 4 is consistent with the Commission's position on addressing the state's transportation funding challenges. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support for AB 4 and direct staff to prepare and transmit a letter to the author, a letter of support to the author. AB 194, Frazier, provides the opportunity for Caltrans, in addition to regional agencies, to apply to the Commission for the development and operation of high-occupancy toll lane facilities. This bill requires the Commission to review and approve applications and conduct at least one public hearing in Northern California and one in Southern California. Additionally, the Commission is required to establish guidelines for the development and operation of state-owned and regional hot lane facilities. This bill provides for reimbursement to the Commission for all costs and expenses incurred by the Commission in the processing of regional transportation agency applications for hot lane facilities. AB 194 increases the opportunity for the state and the regions to utilize hot lanes and contribute to the development of consistent statewide congestion management policies to promote connectivity, efficiency, and reliability of California's transportation system. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support for AB 194 and direct staff to prepare and transmit to the author a letter of support. AB 227, Alejo, amends accelerating the repayment of loans from transportation funds to the general fund from January 1st, 2019 or later to December 31st, 2018. AB 227 would stop the use of late fee for debt service on general obligation bonds and would prohibit loans to the general fund. AB 227 proposes to stop the use of price-based excise tax to backfill transferred weight fees or to backfill weight fee loans to the general fund. AB 227 would also stop the non-Article 19 revenue transfers to pay for debt service on mass transportation bonds. Additionally, AB 227 would remove the December 31st, 2016 deadline for public-private partnerships, thus extending indefinitely the authorization for the Department of Transportation and regional transportation agencies to enter into comprehensive development lease agreements with public-private entities. AB 227 is consistent with the Commission's position on addressing the state's transportation funding challenges. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support for AB 227 and direct staff to prepare and transmit to the author a letter of support. AB 1265, Perea, would extend indefinitely the authorization for Caltrans and regional transportation agencies to enter into comprehensive development lease agreements with public-private entities, a P3. Since the passage of SB 4 in 2009, only one P3 project has been received by the Commission for approval. The current authorization for the utilization of P3 procurement sunsets on January 1st, 2017. The P3 project delivery method is very complex, Requiring adequate time and careful planning to allow for the P3 method to lapse would limit the project delivery options available to the state and regional transportation agencies that are looking at the P3 method as a viable mechanism for delivering their project. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support for AB 1265 and direct staff to prepare and transmit to the author a letter of support. ACA 4 Fraser is a measure that would reduce the voter threshold from 2/3 to 55% for local transportation projects. The Commission supported two similar measures introduced in 2013 to reduce the voter threshold for local transportation projects, which failed to pass. Understanding the overwhelming need for transportation funding and the Commission's previous position on similar bills, staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support in concept for ACA 4 and direct staff to prepare and transmit a letter of support. Finally, SB 321, Bell, makes changes to the administrative process for setting price-based excise tax in order to give the State Board of Equalization the tools necessary to reduce the overall volatility of this revenue. Specifically, this bill allows BOE to use a 5-year forecasting period, as opposed to the current 1-year model, to adjust the rate to generate an amount of revenue that maintains revenue neutrality. Additionally, SB 321 allows BOE to extend the period to achieve revenue neutrality from 1 year to 3 years, and to make partial adjustments in order to make more gradual adjustments, basically true-ups. This bill also provides an opportunity for BOE to adjust the excise tax more frequently than annually if changes are needed. SB 321 is consistent with the Commission's position on addressing the state's transportation funding challenges. Therefore, the staff recommends the Commission adopt a position of support on SB 321 and direct staff to prepare and transmit a letter of support to the author. Commissioners, that concludes my report. Staff recommends the Commission accept the staff recommendations and provide direction on any additional legislation of interest.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I have two speaker slips for public comments. Commissioners, would you care to take public comment first before deliberation on this? Okay. So first up is Mr. Gary Miller. Gary? Would you head to the microphone, and how about 3 minutes?
One of those 3 minutes, I'll try hard.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Miller. I'm a city councilman from the city of Seal Beach. I'm also representing Seal Beach today. I am also, for your knowledge, a member of the OCTA Board of Directors, but I'm in no way representing OCTA here today. I'm here to comment on Assembly Bill 1459, authored by Assemblywoman Yan Kim and sponsored by the Coalition of Cities, Corridor Cities. Assembly member Yan Kim has introduced legislation to stand up to Caltrans by fighting for the residents of Orange County. I stand here today in support of this legislation and ask CTC to consider taking and supporting our position. I jumped right over it since I got going fast. I want to thank CTA for all you do for Orange County, for all you do for the state of California, and in particular thank Chairwoman Lucy Dunn for her outstanding being an advocate for Orange County.
Thank you.
I want to point out that this legislation will probably first address I-405 improvement project. This is a project that Caltrans has identified for Alternative 3, which is a toll lane project. I was not on the board of OCTA in 2012, but OCTA voted against Alternative 3, which is the toll lanes. And as of today, since October 2012, OCTA board has still not voted for Alternative 3, the toll lanes. I consider Alternative 3 a $4.4 billion ripoff of the Orange County voters, or taxpayers, I should say. $1.3 billion will go to modify bridges and add one general purpose lane. But there will be no additional free lanes for the toll payers in taxpayers in Orange County. They will have 4 general-purpose lanes and they have today 4 general-purpose lanes and 1 HOV lane. Once you do Alternative 3, they will have 5 general-purpose lanes, which will be free, and 2 toll lanes. Between 2019 and 2041, it's estimated that there will be a $3.1 billion gross revenue from tolls. So the Orange County taxpayers will pay $1.3 billion to modify the freeway so that Caltrans can put in toll lanes, and then they will pay $3.1 billion in tolls. So that means the taxpayers are getting nothing more than the opportunity to pay to be in the toll lanes. They'll end up paying $4.4 billion for this project. If Caltrans would put forth $82 million, we could have a second HOV lane, and the taxpayers of Orange County would save $3.1 billion. That's money out of their pockets in Orange County just for an $82 million or $100 million investment. Caltrans cannot build this project unless they use the M2 funds. The taxpayers of Orange County never anticipated toll lanes coming in and being utilized. So they're paying this $1.7 billion will never happen if M2 money is not used. We need to find a consistent, fair, and equitable way for the California transportation system to be financed, but not by leveraging the taxpayers' funds like M2 to the detriment of the taxpayers. Again, I'd ask for CTC's support of Bill AB 1459.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
That was
Thank you very much.
version.
You hit it at 3 minutes, so good job. Excellent. Thank you. And that, are there any questions by the Commission? I see none. Diana Lee Carey. And reminding our folks that our item here is state and federal legislation, so I also presume this is AB 1459 Young, which, if I recall, is not even on our agenda today. So 3 minutes, Ms. Carey.
Okay.
Welcome.
First of all, gosh, I hope this is high enough. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. It's a hot mic. You're fine.
Okay. Is it good? That's great. Well, first of all, congratulations on your new chairmanship, Mrs. Dunn. My name is Diana Carey. I'm here representing the corridor cities. The corridor cities are Los Alamitos, Seal Beach, Westminster, Huntington Beach, Costa Mesa, Fountain Valley, and the unincorporated area of Rossmore. And we are here in support of Young Kim's legislation 1459, and we are asking for support of the CTC as well. First off, I wanted to say that the locally preferred option is certainly not toll lanes. The Caltrans has selected our locally preferred option. The OCTA board, in their wisdom twice, as Chairman Miller said, has rejected the toll lane facility. We feel the corridor cities, this is usurping Measure M. In Measure M, delineated very clearly that we were supposed to get 1 extra lane, and as Director Miller said, right now we have 5 free lanes after they reconstruct the 17 bridges. Because of the configuration of the toll facility, we will still have 5 free lanes. And what that means to us, I know they've dangled some things out there and said, oh, we'll give you 2+, or we'll make it continuous access. And you need to know I'm also a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Huntington and in Westminster. Even though we don't like the toll lanes, we said that 2+ and continuous access would be an acceptable alternative. And we have been told that they will only do 2+ for a very limited amount of time. They won't do continuous access at all, even though it's been done in other parts of the state, because of the funding with the public-private partnership. The continuous access, they're telling us, is not predictable enough of a revenue stream, and the 2+ extends the debt out too long. That's not what we voted for in Measure M, so we just feel that that's really usurping it. Director Miller spoke a little bit. The OCTA estimates, round trip for the 13 miles was in 2013 $19.50. That's round trip. They want to hook it to the 73. It's $30 a day round trip. And the way it's configured right now with only 2 exits on the whole area, the problem with that is people are going to be off on all of our surface streets. That's why we are a corridor, because we have the throughways opposite of the freeway. We are not the 91. We are continually compared to the 91. 91 is a captive audience. We are not. So we are going to be stuck with congestion on our surface streets with this, and a huge backup at the county line, and they're going to take over the West County Connector project that I sat on for 4.5 years that we just finished. So we really are very concerned about this. We know that this is going to affect the sustainability and livability of our local communities. Once we get this in, it's going to be in. And I know with the other self-help communities, I know I have been contacted personally by some of the counties that don't have sales tax measures yet. And while I thought M2 was really a good thing, you need to honor Measure M, and that means that we need to get the extra lane and not have it taken away.
Thank you,
on the
Mrs.
side.
Carey. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate your comments. Any questions for the Commission? Thank you very much.
I do.
Yes.
This isn't, we haven't even studied this.
No, it's not on our agenda. It was public comment, and
it's hard to ask questions when we don't know any background.
exactly. And so perhaps that is something that we might look at in a future commission meeting. So thank you. All right, now we have staff recommendation on the matters that are before us. Commissioner, let me turn to our executive director first, and then Commissioner Arp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you heard from Ms. Steinhauser, the funding picture before the legislature is really quite clouded at this particular point. Specifically, Speaker Atkins has made a proposal for providing $10 billion in funding over a 5-year period, but no details, no specific details. There were some elements of her proposal in there, and Senator Bell, chair of the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee, is going to be coming forward with a proposal as well. And so, given that, an alternative that you may want to consider is to adopt a monitor position on some of the funding legislation that has been proposed for your consideration today. That way we can wait until these other bills come out and we can look at the funding situation from a broader perspective and when the picture is a little bit more focused. So, for example, AB 4 and AB 227, those could be a monitor position. Also, SB 321, along the same vein, is actually recommended in your staff report, not for a support position, but a support and concept position, because there may be changes coming along with that. So I just wanted to put that issue before you, Commissioners, as you consider taking positions on this legislation.
Very good. Commissioner Arp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to concur with the executive director's comments. I suppose over the last couple of years there hasn't been anybody that has stirred up the dust any more than I have on the truck weight fee issue. And we have, as a commission in the past, taken a supporting position on concept and even on legislation in previous legislative sessions. I would ask and make a motion that we pull. There were several bills that dealt with truck weight fees in one fashion or another, and I would recommend that we monitor those and not take a position on them while we have these very substantive transportation funding issues developing in the legislature. Let's see how they flesh out. Let's see what happens. And for me, at the end of the day, it's all about whether we get sufficient new revenue along with whatever reforms that we need to make sure that the existing money we have is properly spent. The truck weight fee issue is connected to that in many people's minds, but in my mind, it's about figuring out a solution that we can all get behind and will actually get something done for our transportation system. So I would like to see how this develops this year, and would make a motion that we pull out those particular references to truck weight fee legislation and put those in a monitor position.
We have a motion by Commissioner Arp, second by Commissioner Alvarado, to pull out all measures concerning truck weight fees and monitor those bills as transportation funding measures are being vetted.
Can we identify those bills, please?
I can do that for you, Commissioner. That would be AB 4 and AB 227 would go from support to monitor, and SB 321 would go from the recommendation that was verbally made to support in concept.
Commissioner Fromer.
Thank you. Just a comment and a question. I agree wholeheartedly with what Commissioner Arp just said. And I think the good news for us this year is finally, after we've been crying in the wilderness and done the needs assessment and all these other things to try to get attention, people are paying attention this year, and I think that's a very good thing to this transportation funding crisis. Can I ask a question, though, with regard to the legislation that would basically take the sunset off on the P3s? Do we have any agencies that we believe are currently considering P3s for projects as staff have? I know they don't have to tell us if they are, but does anybody sort of give us an inkling that they're coming forward with that?
Yes, Commissioner, staff has received notifications from, I don't know if Comey at GC and Malcolm may want to speak to this, but there are agencies considering the P3 concept throughout the state. And so, to the extent that folks aren't trying to chase that statutory deadline to get it right, I think that's very important. And so, the goal would be in the future, the next package that comes before you is a well-thought-out package and not something that was rushed to meet a deadline.
Okay, that's good to know, because with that, I would definitely support putting a support submission on those bills. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Mr. Kempton, your light's on? Yes? Yes? Any other comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. And clarification on specifically the bills to amend your recommendation. Carrie, have you got all that?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. All in favor? Any opposition? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Anything more, Carrie, on this report?
No.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on now to item number 14. Number 14 on the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee and Pilot Program Update with Laura Pennebaker.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This item was provided to you as a pink. It is an informational item. Staff has an update to provide on the Technical Advisory Committee membership. We recently received a resignation notice for Supervisor Scott Haggerty, who is serving as an urban elected official representative on the committee. Utilizing the process outlined in statute, the chair of the commission, in consultation with the Transportation Agency Secretary, is currently working to identify a replacement member for appointment. Until that time, we do have a vacancy on the committee. The committee will be holding its third meeting tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m., here at the Hotel Irvine in the Trabuco Room. The committee will be discussing technology policy objectives, as well as pilot program, operational concepts, enabling technologies, and system architecture. All meeting materials have been posted to the committee's website, and the meeting will be webcast. That concludes my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions if needed.
Very good. Commissioners, any questions, comments? Thank you very much, Laura. Moving now on to item number 17, Budget and Allocation Capacity Update with Laurel Jensen. And Stephen Keck. Yay.
Oh, you got a yay.
You got a yay from me, Stephen.
Thank you. Laurel, do you want to start it off? Or okay, thank you. So, afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Stephen Keck with Caltrans, here with my, I guess not monthly anymore, but my every meeting update on allocation capacity and outlook in the budget. Starting with allocation capacity, through January, we allocated about 33% of the total capacity for the year, with about $2.5 billion left in total allocation capacity for the rest of this year. It's worth noting that the TCRP is slightly overallocated. That's not really a big issue, and I think that we talked about that at the last meeting. And again, late in the year delivery is not uncommon at all, so we're expecting to see the projects come in the next couple of meetings and utilize this allocation capacity. But in effect, I think today we have about $350 to $60 million coming through for allocation, so that's another 7% there. At the last commission meeting, we talked about potential changes to the price-based excise tax. At that time, we were working with the governor's budget estimate of 12.5 cents per gallon, and we had received the staff recommendation for the Board of Equalization to reduce the price-based excise tax down to 10.5 cents. As I say, it might be slightly old news at this point, but on February 24th, the Board of Equalization elected to choose a rate different from the staff recommendation. So instead of the 10.5 cents, the board chose 12 cents. Which is still a 33% decrease in the price-based excise tax, but certainly better than what staff had recommended, which would have been, even more drastic. The other piece of the tax adjustments made by the Board of Equalization that we don't really talk a lot about because it's not nearly as dramatic is they adjust gasoline excise tax, but they also adjust the diesel excise tax. So along with that fuel tax swap that occurred in 2010, they increased the sales tax on diesel and decreased the excise tax. And it's also adjusted annually to maintain revenue neutrality. So what has happened is because the price of diesel has dropped, collections from the sales tax on diesel have dropped, they're increasing the excise tax on the diesel side by 2 cents per gallon starting July 1st. So we see a 2 cent increase to 13 cents a gallon on the diesel side, which will, because diesel is certainly not used as much, will increase revenues about $60 million. But going back to the price-based excise tax on gasoline, this next slide shows the results of that, and it really highlights a couple of things. The first is that one-third drop in revenue decreases the 1/3 drop in the excise tax rate will decrease total revenue collections by about $800 million overall. And because the weight fee backfill has the first call on this tax, all of that reduction is focused in the three areas that get the rest of it. So what you see on this chart is the STIP, local share, and the shop share are all reduced by almost 60% as a result of the current law and how the tax is distributed. So what we see here is last year, STIP and local agencies each received almost $680 million. Let me correct that. In the current year, they're estimated to receive $680 million. And in the budget year, the estimate is $297 million for those two areas. On the shop side, the estimate is dropping from 180 to about 81. But the good news on that front is the $60 million I talked about on the diesel side helps offset that a little bit, but certainly not all of it. Another follow-up item that Commissioner Dunn had asked about, and I'm not just bringing this back now because you're chair, but something we've been looking at for a while is the effect of cap and trade, and certainly with fuels coming under the cap and trade laws beginning in January 1. We had seen a number of estimates out there that were saying somewhere between 10 cents and 12 cents a gallon. Last week, earlier this week, I had heard from the Republican side of the legislature that they were estimating 13 cents a gallon. So we looked at California gas prices compared to the national averages going back 10 years. So we were able to look at the weekly gas prices and analyze what the general difference was between what we paid in California and the rest of the country. And we have determined it's about 10% more. And what we did is when January came around, we started to look at, was the new price we were paying different than the 10% we were paying before? So was there a greater difference than there was before? And what we found for at least the first 6 weeks of the year was that there was a difference, and it was in range with these estimates that we're seeing. There was a lot of variation, though. So in 1 week it was 6 cents, in another week it was as high as 18. But in general, the estimates of 10 to 13 cents per gallon seem to be about right. Unfortunately, I think it was on February 18th, we had a refinery fire here in Torrance. Well, not here in Torrance, but close by in Torrance. And there's a metal workers strike that has reduced the capacity for gasoline production in California. And we saw huge spikes in California gas prices. In 5-week period in February and March, we saw a $1 increase in the price of gasoline. So if you drive an electric car, maybe you didn't notice this, but huge spike, $1 in 5 weeks. It's since come down 17 cents, but everything's blown out of the water by the specific events in California. But up until that point, we were confirming more or less that those estimates were correct. And when things settle down, when things get back to normal, we'll get back on that and see if that holds true through the year. The final piece for this presentation is to follow up on another question that came up at last meeting, which was regarding California Caltrans staffing levels. I had promised to get back to the Commission with at least a 10-year history of staffing levels at Caltrans, and I did send a letter in late February, and I just wanted to follow up with this chart, which was an attachment to that letter. The chart shows 3 different data points. The blue background piece of this is the California population, which has increased about 5 million people since the turn of the century. It shows Caltrans's budget, overall budget, which are those green bars. And we saw some increases, of course, with Prop 1B and with ARA. And we're back down a little bit, but we're still 27% higher than we were at the turn of the century. And finally, the black line that runs through the middle here is Caltrans staffing levels as authorized in each successive budget act. Since the turn of the century, or rather the year 2001, right after the Traffic Congestion Relief Act began to dedicate sales taxes on gasoline to transportation, the department has decreased in staffing more than 4,000 positions in the last 14 years. We did have some minor increases in staffing levels to deal with Proposition 1B and with ARA, but we've since attrited those increases and many more. In fact, since 2007-8, when we had our peak staffing levels for our capital outlay support program, that program has decreased 25% since that peak. So in terms of workload for that area, which includes not only state staff but also contracted staff and overtime, that workload has decreased 3,200 full-time equivalents since 2007-8. So significant reductions there. I think part of the problem, and this is a lesson learned for me, is when I talk about from the governor's budget perspective, we're only just starting the budget process. And a lot of these reductions in state staffing occurred in the springtime and with April revise and May revise portions of the budget process. So what I want to do is to make sure that I'm being very clear when I come to you and talk about staffing levels or funding levels from where we ended up when the budget was passed, so that there's no confusion that what we're talking about is the final adopted budget. And with that, I'll move on to looking at future events coming up here in just a couple of weeks, and this is something I've been touting probably the last 4 or 5 commission meetings. The finance package, which includes Chart C, the big funding chart, is coming out April 1st. And it's not a joke. It's just the date that it's coming out is April 1st. Signed copies will be available on request, but we don't do framing. And it's actually slightly simpler this year. We did have a couple of funds fall off, which has been a long-standing goal, certainly of my area in transportation. May revise, which I just talked about, the spring part of the budget process is expected to be released in mid-May. And, of course, the budget adoption at the end of this fiscal year in June. Normally, I kind of copy whatever Vince says about the budget on the federal side, but Vince isn't here today. So I'll just remind everyone that the current federal act that authorizes transportation funding expires May 27th. So that's not very long. I certainly don't expect a 5-year or 6-year plan before then, but I have my fingers crossed for something before the start of the next federal fiscal year. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take.
I would like to just say that I personally tape a copy of the funding flowchart to the back door of my office. So whenever I have private office meetings and I close the door, I scare the crap out of people. And I also love to put it up on the wall and then compare it to the CEQA flowchart because they're both looking about the same to me now.
Well, the pie charts make nice dartboard targets.
Exactly. Commissioner Inman. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that?
No, it was mine.
Yeah.
We share a mic, so we'll come back. Last time, the Highway Trust Fund got close to being zero. We got some notices from the feds saying we might get some slow pays.
Yeah.
How are you in terms of reserve? And do you have enough cushion to carry us through if our partners slow down?
So that raises an interesting point. The act expires May 27th, but we have not heard from the feds that they're having cash flow problems. So the issues that we were experiencing I think it was in the fall, they were looking at running out of cash to pay us. We've not heard that this year. So if there's so far, well, they're running out of cash, but they haven't notified us that they may delay payments, if that makes sense. So
it does not make sense, but
well, the Federal Highway Trust Fund has been running a deficit for 6 or 7 years now, and in fact, they've had about $60 billion in bailouts from the Federal General Fund. But they're not seeing an imminent cash flow issue within the next 2 months because they promised to notify us. They have not given us that notification. But their authorization expires May 27th, which is like closing the door on any expenditures that could be made. So to answer your basic question, yes, we have enough reserves to handle at least 2 months of cash flow issues, if not 3.
Commissioner Arp.
yeah, I don't know. The federal funding issue, to me, is like those movies where you know an asteroid is going to crash. The scientists tell you, but maybe if you're lucky, it'll just miss us. I don't know. But anyway, there's nothing you can do about it. So I don't know. That's not what I actually was going to say.
But I love that analogy.
I couldn't help myself. On the weight fees, it seems to me that we sort of treat the weight fee backfill as like a separate little pot which has no connection with anything. In my mind, the real hit on this is really to STIP and locals. I mean, they're the ones that are taking the biggest cut because I would assume the weight fees are backfilling. They go back in the state highway account, right? That
Yes,
money
that's
goes
correct.
in, and you're using that statewide highway account primarily to pay for maintenance and shop.
Correct.
I mean, that's where most of that money's going, right?
Yes.
So not to minimize this, because I think it's an extremely critical issue, and I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure out how we can fix this whole thing in my day job. But I think it would be more accurate if you look at that, the shop fund isn't really taking as big of a hit as the other two. The other two pieces, the locals and the STIP program, I think are really taking it hard, and I don't know, if we can't turn this around, those are the areas where we're not going to be able to. We're going to be cutting projects, is what we're going to be doing. That's my opinion. Does that make sense to you?
Well, certainly the way the law is set up, the impact does fall on those 3 program areas. Now, they're all being cut the same percentage, but you're absolutely right. The amount of dollars that go to local funds are being severely impacted.
Well, the weight fees are still hanging in. I mean, the weight fees get the first dollar, so you're getting $1 billion in weight fees, right?
Yes.
Which is actually a little bit more than what we were getting before. But so that's the first cut, and that money is going to go to shop and maintenance. But the others don't get that. I mean, they get what's left, and that's what the real That's where the real cuts are coming, it seems to me.
Certainly, but again, the weight fee backfill is backfilling weight fees that are being taken out of the state highway account directly. So it's a net zero wash there. And then the way the law is written, that's why the reduction in funding impacts those other three areas.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen, don't go too far, but we've got a timed item here, and with my colleagues' permission, we're going to skip over 18 and 19 for a second and go to items number 20, 21, 22, 23. So, item number 20, hearing on the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines. Lori Waters.
Commissioners, the purpose of this hearing is to obtain final public comment on the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines before adoption. The proposed 2015 ATP guidelines are included as an attachment to tab 21. The Commission guidelines are to describe the policy, standards, criteria, and procedures for the development, adoption, and management of the Active Transportation Program. On March 20th, 2014, the Commission adopted the inaugural Active Transportation Program guidelines. The ATP's governing statute, Senate Bill 99, states that the Commission may amend the adopted guidelines after conducting at least one public hearing. In amending the guidelines for the 2015 ATP, staff didn't seek a complete overhaul of the 2014 guidelines, as those guidelines worked well for laying the groundwork for the ATP. Staff chose rather to make revisions and clarifications as necessary to continue improving this new program. To develop the 2015 guidelines, staff conducted 2 work group meetings, one in December of 2014 in Sacramento and the other in January of this year in Los Angeles. Staff also participated in a Caltrans ATP workshop in February. These meetings were open to all interested participants and had a teleconference option. In addition to hearing feedback through the workshops, staff also received comments through letters, email, and other informal communications. Staff also reported on the ATP guidelines process at the January Commission meeting and heard public comment. We believe the guidelines developed by this process represent a general consensus of the ATP stakeholders, while acknowledging that everyone involved does not agree on every item, and staff needed to make some decisions for the good of the program. Some of the key revisions and clarifications in the 2015 ATP guidelines are the following. The 2015 guidelines propose that applicants do not need to bring in matching funds. However, we are encouraging matching funds by offering points to applicants who propose to bring in matching funds. For infrastructure projects, we made clear that these projects will not be programmed without a completed project study report or equivalent. Next, we modified one of the disadvantaged communities definitions to state that it needs to be in an area identified as among the most disadvantaged 25% in the state, according to the CalEnviroscreen score, as opposed to the top 10%, which is what we had in the last guidelines. This change was made to align with the other funding programs that use this same definition. We also added language to the disadvantaged communities criteria to be clear that for a project to be considered a disadvantaged communities project, the applicant must show direct and meaningful benefit to a disadvantaged community. Next, to measure the benefit cost of a project, we're asking applicants to use the benefit cost model developed by Caltrans to determine their score, but also to provide feedback on this new model. Next, we are providing for more flexibility in allocations by allowing any amount allocated for environmental can also be expended for design. The roles and responsibilities have been revised to give the Commission responsibility for directing the evaluation process so the Department can focus on reviewing project applications for eligibility and deliverability. We also clarified that MPOs in the MPO competitive portion of the program can propose a contingency list of projects that will be in effect only until the adoption of the next statewide program. Other changes to the guidelines were made mostly to clarify language and definitions. At this point, the staff recommends opening the hearing for public comment.
Very good, thank you. You've heard staff's recommendations. Any questions of staff? We have 5 public speakers, commissioners. I would like to call up Kurt Brockey, OCTA first. And Kurt, with your permission, 2 minutes or less. Or less.
Thank you. I'm Kurt Brockey with OCTA's Planning Division. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. We do appreciate all the work that the staff did related to the ATP guidelines. You'll note we sent a letter in the January timeframe and suggested some revisions, and we appreciate all the work that was done in terms of responding to some of those comments. We also want to thank the Commission for your continued support for active transportation plans that are referenced in the guidelines. We still have local agencies that want to pursue active transportation plans, and I think it's important that stay in these particular guidelines in the near future. That may wane over time as these plans are prepared and project implementation continues. But again, we support the continued inclusion of active transportation plans in the guidelines. And again, thank you. Less than 1 minute.
You did well. Thanks, Kurt. Next up, Patricia Chen, LA Metro, then Stephen Pachan from SCAG. Patricia, 2 minutes or less.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I think I can use far less than that.
Excellent.
The guidelines are in wonderful shape. Thank you very much, staff, for all the work that you've done. And I just want to quickly lend support for not only the guidelines, but also the commentary that it would be very helpful to have a little additional time with the eligibility of the ATP funds for planning. In LA County, a large majority of our 89 local jurisdictions do not yet have both a bike and pedestrian active plan, and in order to make sure that the ATP funds are used very effectively, it would be very beneficial to support those planning activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stephen Pachan, and then Demi Espinoza, Safe Roads to School. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Stephen Patch. I'm a Senior Regional Planner at SCAG. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I want to extend appreciation to staff for preparing the guidelines and basically echo the prior two speakers in the support for continued planning, funding for planning for ATP. SCAG and the County Transportation Commissions support continued funding of planning projects, including the development of community-wide and district plans, like first, last mile, or bike share plans. Out of the 191 SCAG member cities, only 93 have bicycle plans, and only 27 have pedestrian plans. I point this out because these plans are vital to the continued update of SCAG's RTP every 4 years, utilizing these plans as an integral data source for the update of that plan. And just in general, these local plans are critical to the development and implementation of projects that meet state mobility and sustainability goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Demi Espinoza, and then Kenneth Cow. Come on up, Kenneth, and stand in waiting there.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Demi Espinoza, Safe Routes to School National Partnership. We appreciate the hard work of CTC and Caltrans staff in developing the guidelines and application for Cycle 2 and the open process for stakeholders to provide input through development. We support the ATP Cycle 2 guidelines in their current form, specifically appreciate the intent to continue the commitment to funding Safe Routes to School projects and the improvement of defining disadvantaged communities as for those applicants that can demonstrate truly meaningful benefit that target disadvantaged residents in the project area. We also support that up to 5% of the ATP funding can fund planning in disadvantaged communities. A large majority of disadvantaged communities have not had resources or capacity to undertake active transportation planning, and therefore need these funds to be able to identify and develop good community-supported projects for future applications for ATP funds. We encourage you to continue to support planning with ATP funding and staff to evaluate the number of plans developed to determine whether to continue funding plans in future rounds. Thank you for your support on this very important and popular program.
Thank you very much. Kenneth Cow, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's nice and warm back there by the door. I just wanted to also support the previous speakers. We think that plans should be eligible for one more cycle. But also I wanted to specifically thank Commission staff, Laurel and Lori. Not only did they have to finalize the statewide ATP, but they also provided comments to MTC for our regional guidelines, which are on your agenda for item 22. So with that, again, thank you, Commission staff, and that concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much. Are there any other public comments? None. Commissioners, Ms. Inman.
I have a question going back to the Orange County presentation on the North County 66-mile loop, and what we saw with that were some gaps. And we also learned that there are 180 schools that are connected via that necklace. How do we look at those gap closures? Because it seems to me that what we heard was, well, we can coax them along, but we're not sure when those individual cities are going to connect those gaps. So what do we have in our guidelines to incentivize gap closures?
That item has been included in the application for this round. You get points for showing a gap closure. So we've added some extra incentive to that for this cycle.
Enough to make a gap get closed faster? Are there enough points to be meaningful, I guess is my question.
I would think so. I'm not sure that the final application is coming out this week, the end of this week, but and I'm not sure exactly how many points it is. I think it's 5 or 10. It's part of the first question, which is 30 points altogether, which is about increasing biking and walking altogether.
Commissioner Assimi and then Commissioner Guardino.
Quick question, Lori. Street lighting, safety lighting for bicycle and pedestrian paths are covered?
Yes, that is covered generally as an eligible project. Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Guardino.
Thank you, Chair Dunn. I have to deliver a message that I've delivered before that a lot of people may not agree with. I say this as a dedicated cyclist myself who is appreciative that we have an active transportation plan, but still with a state of 38 million people, not a whole lot of funds to distribute. With that context, I continue to be very concerned that we have planning funds instead of direct projects or programs that are actually going to directly benefit the active transportation choices of Californians that are direct. So while I appreciate the comment about plans, let me be more specific. One, again, a very limited amount of dollars that I want to see go to direct programs and projects. And two, the realization, I hope, if a jurisdiction cannot afford a plan and we make that investment, taking away finite resources, how is that jurisdiction ever going to be able to afford any of the projects or programs called for in the plan? How are we going to be assured, using taxpayer dollars as a commission, trying to be good stewards of those dollars, that that plan is ever going to deliver any improvement? I'd like to try to meet people halfway. We had, in the first year, tried to keep this to no more than 5%. I think we actually went a little bit over. I'd like to reduce that to no more than 3% in year 2 and no more than 2% in year 3. Again, this may not be something that's embraced on this side of the dais or the other side, but that would be my suggestion, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Guardino. So I'm going to close the public hearing now, right? And public comments are concluded, and commissioners have already started deliberating. We're now on to item number 1, adoption of the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines, Resolution G1504, amending Resolution G1405. Lori.
Commissioners, this is an action item to adopt the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines. The attachment to this item includes a sampling of correspondence received on the ATP guidelines since the January Commission meeting. There's also a letter submitted by SCAG that was provided as a yellow item. Staff recommends your approval of the 2015 ATP guidelines as proposed in your attachment.
All right. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a modified motion. Lori and team, thanks for the great work you've done on this and your outreach statewide. I just applaud you and appreciate all you've done in my own region as well as the other regions. I'd like to make a motion of support with amendments. Before I get to those amendments, though, I also had a question or comment about Area 13C on recreational trails. I thought the goal of ATP funds, as limited as they were to help with traffic relief and safety as well as greenhouse gas emissions. I don't see recreational trails falling into that category. In fact, we've actually struck the language linking it to traffic relief and greenhouse gas emissions solely for recreational trails, which, again, I'm a recreational trail rider as well, but I didn't see that as a use of active transportation funds where we're trying to get people out of 4 wheels and onto 2. So I'm troubled by that. I'd like a response. That won't be part of my immediate motion, but I hope we have some dialogue about that before we approve the whole plan. My motion, again, is back to plans. Please go ahead, Lori.
I just wanted to state on the recreational trails that there is about $5.7 million over 3 years of the program that's specifically for recreational trails that has to go to those projects.
Does it have to go to recreational trails that are not tied to part of a system that would still capture traffic relief? Because there are some places where a recreational trail is a stopgap between where you're going on a trip rather than somewhere where you've driven your car, adding to traffic and greenhouse gases to do your recreational ride, then go back to your car and go back into traffic and greenhouse gases. So, I mean, is there a way that we can at least use that $5.7 million taxpayer investment in a way where we're actually impacting in a positive way traffic and greenhouse gases rather than adding to it?
The funds need to go to projects that are primarily recreational. However, I would say that the projects that have the benefits as you described would be the ones that would score the best. And
how do we make that clear in the scoring process?
In the application, you would be scoring that on the increase in biking and walking and the other benefits such as safety and public health. So in my mind, I think that would happen naturally in the evaluation process.
And forgive me, I just don't believe anything happens naturally unless it's directed. I would suggest that there be language, not only in what we do with our 50%, but what we ask of MPOs in their language and their 40%, and what we do with the rural regions with their 10%. I'd like to see more specifics on that. In terms of the motion on the other part, if I may so move that our language capture that for year two, I like the fact that you use cycle 2, it's consistent, but for cycle 2, that no more than 3% be used for plans, and in cycle 3, if we can go that far, that no more than 2% be used, which I hope captures what I heard from several speakers, their own acknowledgement that this should be tailing off anyway. So that would be my motion.
I'll second that.
I have a motion from Commissioner Guardino and a second from Mr. Gilmetti to reduce the amount of planning from 2% and then 3%. Excuse me, 3%, then 2%. Commissioner Inman.
I just have a question on what would the impact be in terms of our disadvantaged communities that may not have been able to focus on planning around active transportation. I mean, it seems to me those might be conflicting.
Well, the up to 5% for plans was specifically for disadvantaged communities. So it was, yeah, it would be less funding for that.
Commissioner Arp, then Commissioner Gordino.
So I'm fundamentally in favor of what Commissioner Gardino was pointing out. But just so that I'm clear, the 5 to 3 to 2, that's not directed just to the disadvantaged communities. It is directed just to the disadvantaged communities. Okay, I just wanted to be clear on where that money was going to come out of.
Commissioner Gordino?
Yeah, I want the 5 to 3 to 2 to be to the entire program in terms of plans. When I read 13A, disadvantaged communities, for a project to contribute toward the disadvantaged communities funding requirement, the project must clearly demonstrate a direct, meaningful, and assured benefit. Real projects and real programs have a meaningful and assured and direct benefit. Plans do not. So if we are concerned about disadvantaged communities, then let's do projects and programs, not a report that may never, ever see any of its elements funded.
Thank you, Mr. Gordino. Mr. Gilmetti, do you concur with Mr. Gordino's motion as your second? I have my clarifying question. Is the legislation is clear on what we have? Do we have the discretion to reduce from 5 to 3 to 2? Very good. Thank you very much.
I have just one question.
Yes, Commissioner.
My understanding on the plans and the problem with disadvantaged communities was that they did not have necessarily the funds to be able to even move forward with the project because you had to have, and I did not understand this is forward planning, but it was actually planning that have project-based, and I'd like to get that clarified.
There's specific requirements for the plans, but they should be active transportation plans, bicycling, pedestrian plans, where, you know, it would have potential projects that are prioritized, that kind of plan.
You know, I understand, and I certainly agree that in terms of long-term planning, that you certainly need to limit the amount of money we spend on plans, and it has no direct effect in terms of the project. I would like to see some mechanism where disadvantaged communities would have access to enough planning that they would be able to carry out a particular project, because these are expensive. I mean, you can't just go out and just say we're going to build without having some kind of an idea of how it's going to impact and some of those things. Now, my question would be, at 2% of a very small project, and many of these disadvantaged projects are, as I understand it, a very small amount of money. When you take it down to 2%, does that eliminate the possibility of the project in some instances?
The 2%, if we were to reduce it down, that would be 2% of the overall funding available.
Funding available to that category of the entire amount being allocated?
Of the entire funding for the ATP. So then we would have less funding available for the plans in the disadvantaged communities. So we'd have fewer plans.
But it would not have an impact on the project itself. That's what I need to understand.
I think, Commissioner Burke, that Mr. Gordino's motion is to increase funding for actual in-the-ground, shovel-ready projects. Right. Separate and apart, planning would be reduced at the beginning. So there's a lot of projects that are ready to go now, and I think that's my understanding, is he's trying to get those
projects moving
in the
forward.
ground, forward, as opposed to putting money on plans that may or may not be built in the future.
Absolutely, and I agree with that.
Okay.
I just don't want to see a project that does not go forward because it doesn't have the money, and you're in a jurisdiction where they don't even have the money. In some of these, it might be staggered. It might be where they don't have access to it. So I'd like to at least have a report back in terms of the projects and the implications as it relates to projects and actual construction as a result of the reduction.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner R.?
Yeah, it's basically, in my view, moving dirt and gravel and laying asphalt and getting something done that is going to actually benefit people and not move a lot of paper.
Right.
And we move enough paper in this state to rehabilitate many forests, I'm sure. But yeah, I think this is a reasonable amendment.
Very good. Any other comments, colleagues? We have a motion to gradually reduce the amount of planning funds from 5 to 3 to 2% over time. Ready for a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? A no from Commissioner Inman. Any abstentions? I beg your pardon? And Commissioner Burke abstains. So it appears that the motion passes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was item number 21. We move now on to item number 22, adoption of the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines, MPO, competitive component. Lori.
Commissioners, this is an action item to adopt the 2015 Active Transportation Program Guidelines, Metropolitan Planning Organization Competitive Component, Metropolitan Transportation Commission. The ATP's governing statute, Senate Bill 99, allows the Commission to adopt guidelines proposed by MPOs for administering their MPO competitive component of the ATP. The MPO guidelines must be generally consistent with the state guidelines, but they are allowed discretion in certain areas, such as asking for a supplemental call for projects and project selection criteria and weighting. MTC is opting to hold a supplemental call for projects, to use their own definition of disadvantaged communities, to require matching funds, and to use additional project evaluation criteria. Commission staff reviewed MTC's guidelines and found them consistent with the statewide guidelines. Staff recommends your approval of MTC's 2015 ATP guidelines.
There's a recommendation from staff. Commissioners? A motion from Mr. Fromer and a second from Mr. Assemi. Discussion? All in favor? Opposition? Abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Item number 23, adoption of the 2015 Active Transportation Program Fund Estimate. Resolution number G 1506. Laurel Jansen.
Yes, Commissioners, this is an action item to adopt the fund estimate for the Cycle 2 of the Active Transportation Program. This essentially looks just the same as the last one. So unless you have any questions of Stephen, I will just go forward and recommend that you adopt this fund estimate.
We have a motion from Mr. Assemi, second from Mr. Guardino. Comments?
One quick comment, and this, Commissioner Burke, is where I hope we can provide clarification towards your very legitimate concern earlier. So this fund estimate is $120 million. By slowly reducing the amount of money for plans so that we can do more actual projects and actual programs that have that direct assured benefit in disadvantaged communities and all communities. So this past year it was 5% of the $120 million. My motion earlier was that then it becomes 3% of the $120 million and then 2% of the $120 million. So I hope that provides a little clarity on my intention.
We have a motion to approve the staff's recommendation in item number 23. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstention? Matter passes. Thank you very much, Laurel. I noticed that Vince Mamano has made it back into our good graces by showing up finally for our hearing. So we're going to return to item number 8, and although we've already talked extensively about the feds, we will, very nicely, we're welcoming you to the podium, Mr. Mamano, for the FHWA report.
Is he going to address the asteroid issue?
I hope so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure I can. I'm kind of scared of you people right now, I got to admit. I'm not going to lie to you. A couple things. I don't know if what you've already talked about, because I was sleeping. I was working in another meeting. Legislation, talked about the end of May, the current legislation. The Highway Trust Fund, if you recall, is going to end up in July, August timeframe. So right now, if we get a 6-week, anything more than a 6 weeks extension of MAP 21, then we're looking at a need to do something about the Highway Trust Fund also. Anything short of 6 weeks, they can do under the current Highway Trust Fund. But after that, if there's an 8-week or a 6-month or something like that in that legislation, in that extension, they're going to have to do something about fixing the Highway Trust Fund, during that period. So that's just kind of something to keep an eye on. What I've gathered, I was actually at a national meeting today of all the federal highway leadership earlier today on a webinar, and one of the discussions that Greg Nadeau was saying is that both sides of the aisle are talking, which is a good thing. The chairs in both parties are talking. So there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of focus on the need for legislation in this area. It hits a lot of different sections in government to deal with that. But what I've gathered is there's a lot of people talking. So there's cautious optimism that something might happen, but we'd be speculating. But that's the current status right now. Remember, MAP 21 extension ends in May. Highway Trust Fund becomes an issue in July, August timeframe. Local hiring preference. I don't know if Malcolm talked about that at all. There was something that come out with Federal Highway. We're doing a study. It's an SEP-14. It's part of our, it's called a Special Experimental Program 14. It's our program that Federal Highway uses to look at different types of ways to deliver a project, that type of a thing. Design build is a good example of that. Previously, design build was not eligible under a federal aid program. We did a study under SEP-14 and was able to bring it in and make it a routine practice in the federal aid program. So what we're looking at now, there's a local hiring preference. I know there's a lot of, this is probably towards the locals I need to talk to this about. I know that there's a lot of interest in that. It's a study. What it does, it allows, a lot of the locals right now are doing that with their own dollars, but you're not allowed to do that with federal dollars because it's been determined that that limits competition. So what we're trying to find out is, does it really limit competition? So that's what the study is. The thing I want to make sure, we can actually start right now. The thing I want to make sure is you can't start without an approval from Federal Highway, and that approval is going to come through Caltrans. So we're working with Caltrans on how to evaluate that. If a local has an interest in doing a local hiring preference, which I imagine there'll be a lot of people that do, you can't just say, hey, we want to do it. Because our question statement back to you is going to be, okay, how are you going to study it? How are you going to find out if it in fact does limit competition? What is your process? What are you going to do? So you need to put together a plan. And again, we're working with Caltrans right now to figure out how we do that. But all of those approvals are going to go through Caltrans and then with Federal Highway. So local hiring preference is out there. There's a little bit of confusion right now between the SEP-14 and the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. We're actually allowed to start with it now. The Notice of Proposed Rulemaking is looking at how we would do this in the future, and that's an opportunity to comment on it. So biggest thing is, don't do it now without Federal Highway approval, because that kicks it into an ineligible project if you do it without approval. I hate to say it just like that, but it does. So we're trying to step cautiously here and do it correctly and make sure we're studying and learning so that at the end, if we find out that it doesn't limit competition, then maybe that gets folded all into our regulations and that becomes a regular practice in the federal aid program. And that's both for Federal Highway Administration and for Federal Transit Administration. Couple real quick things. Was there any questions on that one? On the local hiring preference? Can I look around the back? Has anybody got a quick question? Okay, good. I'll be around, and we can talk about it a little bit. Secretary's put out his 40-year framework. I think it's called Beyond Traffic 2045. It's really there to kick off a discussion. He actually kicked it off here in California at Google, so that was kind of neat. So he's trying to figure out where we go. What are some of the things we need to be looking at for the next 40 years? And like I said, it really is trying to kick off a conversation. So if you go to the DOT website, there's a lot of information on that, and it gives you an opportunity to interact, and I think that's interesting. Last thing was ET Plus. I don't know if everybody had been following the guardrail in treatment challenges around the country, the big lawsuit, and then big tests at Federal Highway. Had done, thanks to Caltrans for providing 8 end treatments to allow Federal Highway to do these tests, or allow the company to do the test through Federal Highway. All 8 of those passed. I know the 8th one, there was a big dent in the side of the car, and everybody's a big picture on the news from a helicopter above and saying, and somebody sent a letter saying, I can't believe that that's acceptable, and they all passed. So now it goes back to the states to determine how they want to proceed with the use of ET+. But all 8 of those passed. There's another program that's going to be starting, another review that's going to be starting that AASHTO is a part of, AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. So Malcolm is a part of AASHTO and all of his counterparts around the country. So that's going to be happening here. That's ongoing now. There's another review of what's happening out in the field with safety end treatments. That's all I had for a quick sprint of a presentation here. Does anybody have any questions?
Colleagues, questions? Yes.
Vince, a couple things. Beyond Traffic, there were a series of, I'll call them a virtual webinar chat this week, and I'm not sure if there's another one next week. I think I got that notice because of the National Freight Advisory Committee. But do you know what the distribution list, because I didn't see when I looked through who was on the chat line, and I don't know if it was a scheduling challenge or what, but I'm not sure that we had a lot of California partners participating.
I don't know who that distribution list is, but I can ask them to make sure.
Well, or shoot it over to CTC, and Will can make sure that we at least share that information, because you all are going to the effort to ask us to have to participate in a dialogue looking at our future for 2045, and I think it's important that we're all at the table talking about what we think it might look like. So I want to make sure that we have as active a participation as we possibly can. And then finally, of course, I'm going to ask you about the National Strategic Freight Plan and what you can tell us on that.
And then I would see if there's any member on the National Freight Advisory Committee who would be able to advise us in this area. Do you know anybody on that thing, Lucy? Oh, Fran. Do you have any information on the National Freight?
She doesn't know anything about goods movement.
Don't slap it
I don't
back
know
at
what
me.
you're looking at. Yeah.
I asked
She
Greg
sets herself
Nadeau.
up. This is incredible.
No, I asked Greg Nadeau, and he said, we're
said,
just
"Ask me."
about there. Yeah, he said, ask Vince. No. But in fact, has not met now in a number of months. So in fact, at least for the California members, I can tell you are chomping at the bit to help you all. So the sooner we get that out, I think the better, because it's clearly important to our state.
And I know that the Secretary's Beyond 2045 is a big freight component in that, too. I know that was one of the areas he talked about when he did his thing at Google, that he was really focusing on freight. So I know that's a big interest to him. And he was giving data on freight during that conversation, which I think is important, that people have that data and are understanding the impacts of that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your update, comments, and you're forgiven for being late.
You are so kind.
For this meeting.
You are so kind.
Very good.
I like you better than the last chair. He was he's tougher.
All right, commissioners, I feel a need for a stretch break, but I'd like to get through 2 items, 18 and 19, and then give us a quick 10 minutes to stretch our legs and find where the Cabana boys are by the pool house to go to the bathrooms. I'm anxious to find those guys. And then I'm cautioning all of us that we're going to lose a couple of our members to time commitments. So I'm going to rock and roll through the next half as soon as Stephen helps us with these next two items. So, item 18, discussion of the 2016 fund estimate draft assumptions. Laurel, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, Stephen will be talking about that. It's some very nice assumptions. I think he's doing the right thing.
Nice assumptions.
Yes, I like
Excellent.
I like it.
Wow, Stephen, there's a intro for you.
This is my seventh, I think, fund estimate that I've been involved in with the department, so we're starting to get the assumptions down. Commissioners, this can be a very lengthy presentation, and I recognize we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to try to skim over this as much as I can. Keep in mind, though, this is just an informational part of a two-part process. I'll be asking for you to adopt assumptions at the next meeting. So what we're bringing now is the draft assumptions. As part of the book item, there was a very fascinating 28-page document listing all of the assumptions and the reasons behind them, and I encourage you to read those at some point if you haven't already. These assumptions are really going to guide the fund estimate, and they mainly focus on what to assume for revenue. And as we go through some of the assumptions today, we'll point out a couple that are very important to that revenue. But you also need to understand that, as I think Director Kempton, Executive Director Kempton put it the best I've heard today, which is the picture is very cloudy when it comes to transportation funding. But to the extent that it may result in additional funding for transportation, it's a cloud made up of silver linings. So I mean, I think this is a good opportunity. So as we move forward, talking about the fund estimate, and we move forward towards adopting a fund estimate typically in August, I want to remind folks that if we're going to see a new federal act in the works, or if we think there might be a chance that some state legislation might come through maybe after July, we want to seriously consider postponing adoption of the fund estimate until that's worked out. It doesn't necessarily have a big impact on the STIP process or the SHOP process if we adopt in October, but it'll scrunch things up in the end. But I think it'll be worth it if we can for sure say what the federal funding especially is going to be. As I mentioned, there is an attachment to the book item of all of the assumptions that are included in the fund estimate. We've divided them into three sections. Section 1 are those things that I'm going to ask you to make a decision on. Section 2 are significant issues that will really they are what they are. These include things like loan repayments that are decided in law and the schedules in law. If that schedule changes, the fund estimate will change too, but it's not something we need to make a specific assumption about. And Section 3 are all the minutia. If you only have time to read one of these, I suggest going in priority order 1, 2, and 3. So the way that our assumptions work is, and this is a chart from the last presentation on how the fund estimate works. We start with, obviously, our beginning balances. We add in revenue, and then we account for all of our existing expenditures, and then whatever's left over is what we have for new projects. And the assumptions that we're talking about will affect those three boxes in the middle of this equation, and most significantly, it affects transportation revenue. So in terms of the Section 1 options that we really have three big questions for the Commission, and really two of them make up 98% of the funding for the STIP. The first is sort of a general catch-all. What do we want to assume for the economic impact on transportation revenues? This assumption is, we've bundled up a number of economic assumptions, including what the economy in California is going to do, what that means for VMT, what the price of gasoline might be, how the consumption of those fuels will look in the future, and we've come up with four options. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but the options generally range from most conservative to least conservative. Obviously, option A would be kind of following along what the governor's budget predicts in the future, which is more or less stable consumption, but price-based excise tax is only increasing, or the tax rate only increasing back up to 16.9%. We have a second option that includes price-based taxes going up to 16.9 cents per gallon over the fund estimate period, but assuming a decrease in consumption as fuel efficiency increases. I think it might be a little soon for that because we're seeing tremendous VMT growth right now as the economy gets back on track. The third option, which we're recommending at this point, is to assume that the price-based excise tax eventually, over the fund estimate period, increases back up to 18 cents per gallon. And then the final option, which I think is a little aggressive at this point, would be to assume that the price-based excise tax increases to 18 cents per gallon very quickly within the fund estimate period in the second year. And again, we're not asking for you to make an action today unless you wish to do so, but we're recommending option C in that group of options. It's a little aggressive without being overly aggressive. In terms of federal revenue, Vince can make all of this go away if he can get a bill passed between now and when we adopt the fund estimate in August. But until that time, we need to make some sort of assumption for federal revenues. And for this, we've provided three options. The first option is to assume just straight level funding, exactly what we got this year throughout the rest of the fund estimate. The second option, the one we're recommending, is to assume that we start the first year of the fund estimate where we are now, but we include annual increments for inflation. And we're recommending this because that's what happened with MAP 21. We actually had a little inflationary increase in there. And I'd like to hope that we see that again if there's a long-term funding bill coming down the pike. The third option is what we like to call the disaster option. That's the one where if the federal government decides, and we've seen this before from some Republicans in the House, if they want to fund transportation at the level that they receive transportation funding, it's a significant drop in what can be funded. As I mentioned, I think in the last item, they've had to bail out the Federal Highway Trust Fund to the tune of $60 billion over the last 6 years. So if they cut their expenditures down to the level that they're receiving revenue, we're going to see it's an impact of more than $1 billion over the fund estimate period, which is quite significant. And the third option is a tiny one in terms of dollars, but it's a policy issue that the Commission has chosen to take action on in the past three fund estimates. And it's regarding transfer of excess revenue from the motor vehicle account into the state highway account. The current law provides that funds in the balance of the motor vehicle account should be transferred to the state highway account for use for transportation purposes if they're not needed for immediate use in the motor vehicle account. And that has not happened for more than a decade. It's been used for other purposes, including general fund purposes. But the Commission has chosen to add it into the fund estimate in the last three fund estimates, because if we assume that it's never going to come, it will never come. And I'd like to keep this option open as we move forward, and maybe when things get all better on the general fund side, we'll start to see some of this money roll back into transportation. It's not a very big amount. We would assume or recommend assuming $10 million a year, which is consistent with the action the Commission has taken in the last two fund estimates. Those are the three that we're offering options on. If you have comments on any of the assumptions in the book or in this presentation, you can either give them to me or pass them through staff. I think staff would probably prefer that you do it that way so that they have a clear record. I am prepared to skip over many of the other things I would talk about today because they're not really things I want to talk options. They're just sort of what's out there, if that's the pleasure of the Commission, because we are short on time.
Thank you. Very good. Any questions of Stephen on this item? Thank you very much. Then we move on to item number 19, also an information item on the draft 2016 State Transportation Improvement Program guidelines. Laurel. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is an information item. We're presenting the second draft now of the 2016 STIP guidelines. You saw the first draft back in October last year. What we did is we started back in May of 2014 where we outlined the steps to begin the process early. We held 4 workshops through the summer working with all of our stakeholders and getting a very good input with some generally agreed upon suggestions, including simplifying and using mode-neutral performance measures and using a more robust public process. We incorporated those suggestions from the workshops in the first draft, and since that time, we've received additional suggestions and recommendations from our stakeholders, including the regions. So what we have done is we've incorporated those additional changes, the bulk of which are in Section 19, which is the performance measures. So what we've changed a little bit based on some language from the regions to concentrate more on the RTP and the benefits of the programming as based on the RTP.
Yeah.
So so this is basically what we have right now. We still have some discussions to go forward. The rural agencies are working on performance measures specific to rural counties and rural agencies. We expect that we will get something from them in June, so we'll be coming in with an additional draft at that time. We may, by that time, we'll also have the portion of the guidelines that's specific just to this STIP, and that's where we may talk about things like if we don't have sufficient funding going forward, what will we do to kind of mitigate that? Will we allow current year projects to be delayed into the new STIP? Things like that. So we'll have some additional guidelines that are specific just to this cycle. And so, again, this is just a second draft. We'll be continuing these discussions as we move forward, and we will likely be bringing something back again in June.
Very good. Thank you, Laurel. Questions? Comments? All right, commissioners, let's take a 10-minute stretch break. We will return to item number 24 and in exactly 10 minutes, about 20 to 3.